Hello, welcome to another episode of that Encyclopedia podcast, and today I have a very important message for everyone, and for you as well. The superpower of the day is money. Money is a superpower. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, money can buy you many things. It's said not happiness, but it can buy you things that get you happiness. It can buy you weapons, tanks, aircraft, can buy you an army. Everything has a price, right? So if everything has a price, then money must be a superpower because it can get you anything.
It's the ultimate skeleton key. You've mentioned armies and tanks and not happiness, but may I suggest, if you were fabulously wealthy, buying yourself trainers for over 100 different martial arts, academics for all the natural sciences, plus the social sciences like psychology and criminology, fancy manor in the country, but with local amenity connections and transportation, and most importantly of all, an intimidating suit that makes you look kind of like a bat. And then you'll be ready, fueled by your infinite wealth, to tackle crime on the streets. But not in high-rise office buildings. Only blue-collar crime. We're talking about Batman today. Are you familiar with Batman by any chance?
I'm more than familiar with Batman. I am a person who's seen a number of Batman films.
I mean, there have been many, haven't there?
I've seen a few of the recent ones. More than one interpretation of the character.
This is an important point about Batman, isn't it? That continuity is not, or maybe was not as important as it is now to the comic book industry, or at least to DC Comics. Batman, for those of you who don't know, is a comic book superhero, possibly one of the most well-known, best-known superheroes of all time. Batman is the alias of Mr. Bruce Wayne, an American philanthropist and industrialist and fabulously wealthy sort of playboy by day and crime-fighting vigilante by night. But because he was introduced in 1939, spring 1939, before the outbreak of even the Second World War, at the time continuity didn't really matter. So there have been at least 5 or 6 major generations and regenerations of the character, each with a unique take, and Batman has been everything from a grisly noir anti-hero to a more aligned, almost classic, justice-driven regular superhero, for want of a better phrase, and a campy, almost comic-like, in the sense of humour and satire, superhero. Do you have a personal preference for what incarnation of Batman you would like to see?
Well, I've not seen much of the old Batman stuff, really, and I've heard good things, actually, about the golden days of Batman on the TV, the more camp and comedic style of the character, but I've never seen it myself. So it would be hard for me to say that it's my favourite. I've seen, as I said, a couple of different interpretations of Batman, but not all too different. Different in a few key ways, because I've seen the Batman from the Dark Knight trilogy. What's the name of the actor for Batman in that series?
It's Christian Bale.
Yes, I've seen Christian Bale's Batman, and I've seen Robert Pattinson's Batman in the latest The Batman film. And I have to say, I really liked the most recent film. I probably preferred that Batman to the previous one, even though, well, I say previous one, there was one in between, I'm pretty sure, but that one didn't do so well, and so no one talks about it anymore.
Referring to Ben Affleck's Batman.
Ben Affleck's Batman, not really seen, heard some not great reviews, but Rob's Batman, he's sort of a more grim, angsty, brooding detective sort of Batman, as opposed to a more fighter in the ring, MMA, strength-focused Batman, which we've seen in other recent interpretations. Obviously, Batman can still kick ass, but there's just, more of a focus on intrigue levels of plot as opposed to just being strong and having a good sense of courage and valor. So yeah, I've liked the direction that they've taken it in the new film. Have you seen anything recently?
I haven't. No, I believe that the new film, which I think is called The Batman, with Robert Pattinson, was filmed in Belfast, at least partially, because when I was visiting Belfast in February of this year, there were posters literally everywhere for it, plastered all over the place, noticeably more than you would expect. Everything was replaced. It's like if you go down an escalator on the London Underground to access the tube system, and instead of having different musicals at the West End and adverts and stuff, every single one was just The Batman, coming this spring. But I haven't actually had the chance to see it myself. I am familiar with Christian Bale's Batman also, and Ben Affleck's Batman, who I think did a rather admirable job. I think the mediocre returns of that incarnation were not... I wouldn't assign the blame there to Ben Affleck or the direction of his Batman specifically, but to kind of broader production issues. And I would add to that as well that I think that incarnation of Batman has Jeremy Irons playing Alfred Pennyworth, who is the butler, Batman's confidant, number one bro, close personal friend, and in some incarnations father figure substitute. And Jeremy Irons is excellent in anything, so I have a soft spot for that. But my personal favourite incarnation of Batman, and I'm very excited that I get to bring it up, is George Clooney's Batman from the classic 1997 Batman and Robin. Have you seen this film?
I've not seen that film, no.
It is incredible. So, Batman and Robin sees the crime-fighting duo pitted against Mr. Freeze, who is played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I didn't actually realise until now, because he's like blue and bold and in a high-tech suit for all of the things, so that makes it even better. And they're just making puns for the whole film. It's very campy. It's good fun. Gotham City in that film is full of like statues the size of skyscrapers for reasons that are never explained, and it's just a very light-hearted, unique take on Batman. And I really like George Clooney's interpretation of a more light-hearted character. I don't think as light-hearted as Adam West or Michael Keaton, the original Batman on the big screen, but not as serious as Bale or Affleck or Pattinson.
Yeah, as I said, I haven't really seen any of those sorts of versions of Batman, and I suppose I should check them out just for some diversity in representation. Yeah, one thing that comes up a lot when reading about Batman is this notion of the character having a number of fairly substantial changes in the themes and tone of the character and the show or comic, depending on the time period. We've had Detective Batman, light-hearted comic Batman. There's even been some sci-fi Batman in the comics, which came up, which is interesting. Batman versus aliens sort of stuff. And then a dark, brooding, or a tough beat cop. There's just a lot of variation going on, and it's not like in the comics it's one comic strip story, he's one way, and then in another he's a completely different character. It's more that the characters evolved and sort of turned back and forth depending on the times. and whoever producing it, whatever they've sort of thought is the current Batman to sell. But it's just so interesting how much the character's changed in the sort of tone of the content that he's in.
I agree. And I think the article itself is also extremely interesting, and indeed has been a featured article not only on the English language versions, but also on the Spanish and French language versions. So it's a quality article. But there's so much we could talk about here. So I just want to ask you, we have all the power at the moment for the next 20 minutes. What would you like to discuss? Do you want to talk about the in real life history of Batman and the struggle for writer Bill Finger to be recognized, or the more kind of literary focused interpretations of Batman's characterization and his relationship with money and what this says about the society we live in? Or do you want to talk about Batman's technological prowess and martial arts expertise and how kind of realistic these may or may not be, and whether that even matters, and what it says? And what when you think of Batman, what direction does your mind wander?
Well, I'd certainly be very interested in a discussion of the interpretations of the storytelling in the Batman universe. Like, there definitely are some, even though the tone changes, some recurring sort of themes and inescapable themes tied to a character whose strength comes from his billionaire status. But maybe we should come back to that and take a sort of break from the fictional character of Batman and have a chat about how Batman came to be. So who created Batman then?
Well, for the longest time, if you asked anyone, they would give you one of three answers. Most people would say, I have absolutely no idea. Like, if you are someone who is a bit more familiar with comic books, but in a kind of, casual way, they would probably say Bob Kane, who was the artist. Bob Kane was kind of dabbled in animation and did some writing as well, but for the longest time was credited as the solo or principal creator of Batman. But from about the final years of the 20th century and going into the 21st century, the generally accepted history now is that comic book writer Milton Finger, or Bill Finger, was equally important in the development of the character. And so if you asked a comic book historian, or someone who was super engaged, or just someone who is not old enough to have read the comics before the recognition of Bill Finger, they would tell you that Bob Kane and Bill Finger together created the Batman character. As I mentioned, this was in the 1930s, the late 1930s, and has kind of taken off since then. As you might expect, neither of the creators are still alive today. Kane died in 1998, and Finger died in 1974. And actually, Bob Kane later expressed a degree of regret that he didn't acknowledge Finger's contributions to the creation of Batman whilst he was alive. But at least now they both have the recognition that they deserve.
Yeah, so you've mentioned that Kane was an artist, and he was originally credited with the creation of Batman. But what role did Kane actually have in the creation of Batman, and how is it that we now talk about Bill Finger and him sort of being almost on an equal footing in terms of his importance to the Batman character?
Essentially, Bob Kane was kind of commissioned or requested by what would become DC Comics to create more superheroes for its publication runs, and Kane kind of conceptualized the idea of the Batman, and originally this was the Batman with a hyphen and a capital B and a capital M. I think similar to Spider-Man as well, actually, has kind of gone back and forth on this hyphenated or not idea, and kind of came up with some sketches and original concepts. And according to Finger, the original character that Kane had designed had red, well, the quote says reddish, so kind of maybe maroon kind of tights, reddish tights, boots, no gloves, no gauntlets, a domino mask, swinging on a rope with actual bat wings that I think were part of the costume. I guess it could be like literally a Batman. And Finger's primary and initial contribution was to revise the design of the character himself, kind of turn the wings into more of a cape design, change the domino mask for a cowl, removed any traces of red and kind of color from the outfit, and it kind of evolved from there. And I think it was it's easy to say literally decades, almost like not too far away from a century actually in the future, to say, yeah, that was absolutely the correct decision. But I really can't imagine Batman wearing red tights. I don't know if you could.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough to say. I very much struggle with the idea of the Batman being this character that you described before the modifications suggested by Finger came up. And I think what we can see also is that although we've had this back and forth tone shift, progression of costume design, the actual bread and butter of the Batman costume hasn't changed massively for many, many decades. And I do think that it's quite an iconic part of the character. So I think it's interesting to look back at how this began and the beginning of the feud between who is truly a creator or co-creator of Batman, and to think, what would Batman be without the cowl? Well, what would Batman be without the cape? I mean, with wings, with red tights. Even it was mentioned in the article that one of the reasons to shift away from wings to a cape, wings don't really work particularly well with the idea of a fighting Batman, because wings are kind of unyielding, kind of big and bulky, and a cape is quite nice, flows. You can run around, punch, kick, do a somersault, and you can do that with a cape on, and it's not going to get too much in the way.
I think Edna from The Incredibles would disagree with you strongly there. But
I think
she'd agree with your. Well, I think she'd agree with your first half, and then she'd say, have me in the first half.
Yeah, no capes.
No capes allowed. Yeah, exactly. No capes. Yeah. Well, maybe we could include the first published image of Batman, which wasn't actually in Detective Comics. So Batman himself was a character as a comic strip debuted in Detective Comics number 27, but the first published image of Batman actually appeared in Action Comics 12, which is the comic publication behind Superman, and there was a promotional image of Batman in Action Comics 12 announcing the character's debut in Detective Comics. And it says, "Don't miss it, The Batman. This new thrilling adventure strip starts in the May issue of Detective Comics." And next to it is this kind of mugshot of Batman in his cowl with very, very pointed ears, quite a flat face, a cowl that tapers to almost like a beak-like nose, and two white slits for eyes in line with the curvature of the ears. So it's quite a it's recognizable as Batman, but it's very, very different from the more modern designs of the suit. So I think your point's well made there.
Yeah, I think the other thing, though, even in this very first shot of Batman, of just the head and the cowl being the... how do I describe it? It's the fact that it's hooded and... hood-mask combination. Yeah, it functions as both. Even in this very first ever image of Batman, we've got that as opposed to a domino mask. And I think that really helps to define Batman as a unique looking character. I mean, I'm not sure what superheroes were around before him, but it does seem that there's nothing particularly defining about, some guy's face with a domino mask on. But the cowl with the ears, that is Batman, and you can see that straight away. You don't need anything more to find this character mysterious and interesting.
I mean, if I found myself in an alley dark at night and lightning lit up the sky and this figure was looking at me from the other end, I'd be pretty intimidated, I freely admit.
But yeah.
The name of Bruce Wayne, the identity behind the Batman in story, is also the creation of Bill Finger. The two names, Bruce, comes from Robert the Bruce, or King Robert I of the Scots, who lived in the 14th century, a renowned warrior, rebel, War of Independence, and so forth. And the surname Wayne comes from Anthony Wayne, known as Mad Anthony, a firebrand agitator, sometimes considered a founding father, although one of the kind of secondary founding fathers as opposed to the primary bunch, who was a brigadier general during the American Revolutionary War, famed for his quick temper and bold tactics and so forth. So a combination of this. It's interesting, actually, that the... here's a segue for you. It's interesting that Bill Finger said that he searched for a name that would suggest colonialism. What do you think he meant by this?
Well, I think you're making a nice job of tying Bill Finger's contribution to what might potentially be one of the things that makes Batman so iconic and lasting and leads to the interesting themes that pop up in Batman content. So he's looking to create the archetypal multi-millionaire character who is Batman without the mask. Yeah, colonial character. I don't know exactly what his views on colonialism were, but he is an American, so probably less of a fan than if it was a Brit from a long time ago. But I guess this sense of old inherited power and wealth.
Yeah, I wonder. This leads quite nicely into the character of Bruce Wayne when he's not being Batman as some kind of philanthropist, playboy, techno wizard. I think it's unique. It's one of the most important aspects of Batman's character is that he's a superhero, but he doesn't have any superpowers. The closest thing he has is he's extremely wealthy. I mean, yes, okay, he's a genius, but that's hardly unique. He's a master martial artist in basically everything, but that's also not unique. And I suppose being extremely wealthy is not unique either in the world of superheroes, or in real life indeed. But I think it is the most important factor of the character of Bruce Wayne, because it enables him to pursue his lifelong dedication of fighting crime. He's only able to do this with the aid of technologies and skills that he funds using his incredible wealth. Do you have any kind of thoughts on this aspect of his character?
I'm just being reminded of something else I thought was interesting, that sort of answers this question. What is interesting about Bruce Wayne is how different Bruce Wayne is from the concept of the normal daily life of Clark Kent or Superman when he's not being super. It's sort of a contrast between the two arguably most famous DC superheroes. That on one hand you've got Superman, who lives his life as a journalist. Normally, he's not especially wealthy or powerful, sort of just an ordinary middle-class man. And then you've got, on the other hand, Batman, who is extremely powerful, doesn't really report to anyone when he's in his non-superhero form. But the thing that was mentioned in the article was this idea that Superman gets to sort of be himself. It's almost interesting because Superman is a superhero and he's in fact an alien, and yet so when he's being Clark Kent as acting as if he's a human man, that sort of is him with a mask on, and yet, I mean, he has glasses on almost as his disguise. Yet that's sort of when he gets to be himself in sort of just living his life. When you've got the opposite in Bruce Wayne, who ordinarily is a very wealthy and powerful man, but he really comes alive by being the Batman, and that's something that they seem to play on in at least the Batman movies that I've seen, is this idea that he's not actually very comfortable in his ordinary life of schmoozing, doing charity fundraisers and being an all-round rich person, and actually he's so focused on his job as the Batman that he doesn't really care about the act that he's putting on of being a normal person, or normal, being a non-superhero.
Yeah, I think there's a really nice line in the article that summarizes this distinction that you've elaborated on. It was something like, Batman has a butler, Superman has a boss, or at least Bruce Wayne has a butler, Clark Kent has a boss. I don't think it was maybe... I don't have any evidence that this was kind of a planned, deliberate contrast or anything, but I think it is a really interesting point of departure between the two characters' backgrounds and, you know, alter egos and lives that they live. And I would be really quite fascinated to see this aspect of Batman's character and Bruce Wayne's character explored in future depictions, because it's kind of just functions as a device, right? He has to do all of these things. He has to know all of these skills. He has to acquire all of these gadgets and gizmos because he's by himself and he's anonymous. Therefore, he's super, super rich because he doesn't have superpowers. So it's the only way he can acquire them. So it's kind of just a device that's hand-waved away when it was originally conceptualized. But actually, I think it could be so much more than that. And I would be really curious to see. Is it kind of interrogated at all in the Robert Pattinson film?
I think to some extent, yeah, more so than I've seen in other Batman stuff. So I'd be interested to get your thoughts on it. So you should definitely give it a watch.
I will add it to the list, which is growing with every episode we do at the moment.
Well, that's fine. In exchange, will add having a look at George Clooney's Batman to my list.
Perfect. Lovely. Well, I think that's time.
Yep, there's more than enough. Definitely too much to fit into one episode on Batman. So if you're interested in knowing more, definitely check out that Wikipedia page. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.